Hi, my name is Mike from Radiant Photography, and today I'm going to be talking about Canon's newly announced EOS R. Now, Canon and Nikon haven't had any cameras in the full-frame mirrorless market before now, and I think they assumed that people who wanted a professional quality camera would not be wanting a mirrorless camera. They'd want a digital SLR camera with a full-frame sensor. And if you're going to be doing work with something, you want a full-size body and so forth. A couple of years ago, Sony came out with their A7 series and really kind of proved that there was a market for a full-frame mirrorless camera. A lot of people ended up switching because Sony really hit the mark, and they came out with a high-quality camera in a small package. So now Canon has their EOS R as their answer to the full-frame mirrorless market. And let's take a closer look at what this camera is all about. To summarize, like if there was one way to describe what an EOS R is, it's basically a Canon 5D Mark IV in a mirrorless sized body. Now that doesn't mean that all the features are exactly the same. There's actually some real good benefits to the EOS R. And there's benefits for the 5D as well, but that's the closest thing, the best way that I can come up with to describe it. For instance, both of those cameras have 30 megapixel sensors, and the EOS R has an ISO range of from 100 to 40,000. This is about a third of a stop faster than the Canon 5D Mark IV, which only goes up to 32,000 ISO. And I believe this is because the EOS R has a new Digic 8 processor. And I think the higher-end processor, probably they were able to squeeze a little bit better noise reduction at high ISOs to expand that range. As far as other camera features, it does come with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. There is no GPS in the EOS R, which if you're a landscape photographer and you really kind of want to know where all of your photos are taken, that is definitely a drawback. As far as recording for memory slot, they have just a single SD card memory slot, which I think is probably the camera's biggest flaw. Most people these days are looking for the higher speed memory card slots, like the CFast or the XQD slots. Ones that you can have a much faster write speed to the card and a more reliable card. Now, the SD card slot in the EOS R is a UHS 2 slot, and so performance is better than a typical SD. But it's still, I would have liked to see them have like 2 card slots. Even if it was just 2 SD slots, that would be good. But using a faster CFast or XQD slot would have been really nice. As far as autofocus, the autofocus on the EOS R is a pretty amazing system, actually. They claim to have over 5,600 selectable autofocus points. And these autofocus points span 100% of the width and 88% of the height of the frame. So really, no matter where you're trying to focus in the frame of the photo you're taking, you can focus there, and it's really, it'll let you get exactly what you want to do. Maybe the days of focus and recompose are over. So, and the other benefit with the autofocusing in this camera is that it will autofocus all the way down to f11. And so if you have a slower camera lens on maybe with a teleconverter that really doesn't give you a wide aperture, that won't be a problem with this camera. It will focus all the way down to f11. And another nice thing about the autofocus system is that for the first time, Canon's adding focus peaking into one of its digital SLR cameras, or mirrorless camera, of this grade. So yeah, the autofocus I think won't be a problem. It uses the same dual pixel autofocus that a lot of other Canon cameras use now that really do a good job of focusing, doing a smooth focusing during video, and for stills really snap into focus real quickly. And I don't expect anything less in this kind of setup. Now, there are 2 features that this camera has that are new for Canon. first is a touch bar along the back of the camera, and it like kind of is the same position as where your thumb is on your right hand. And the idea is that with this touch bar, you can either slide your thumb across it or tap either side, and you can use that to adjust the autofocus settings, the ISO, or white balance. And so that's kind of nice. It kind of makes it reminds me of Apple's MacBook Pros having the touch bar on them, and this is kind of the same idea but with a camera. And so I think that's going to be real handy. The other new feature that hasn't been on any of Canon's cameras in the past is a control ring on the RF mount lenses. And so each of the RF mount lenses has a third ring. It has the zoom ring and the focus ring, but there's a third one called the control ring. And you can use this control ring to change the aperture, the shutter speed, ISO, or exposure compensation. So basically you can use that dial to adjust your exposure very quickly while using the camera. And I kind of like this idea because it lets your left hand kind of take care of more the exposure control of the image you're taking. So you don't have to worry about trying to do that on your right hand while you're trying to trigger the shutter as well. So that's kind of neat. There's also lens adapters. So the mount on this camera is an RF mount, but there are adapters for the EF mount cameras. There's a few different options. I won't go into all of them here, but one of them does have that same control ring, so you can use that on any of your if you're adapting any of your EF lenses to this camera. So yeah, again, those are two new features that are really kind of handy. Another nice thing a feature I really like about this camera is that it uses the same batteries, the LP E6N batteries that are used by Canon's 5D, 6D, and 7D. So if you're like me and you have a bunch of these batteries laying around already in your kit, then you can use them with the new camera and not have to worry about going out and purchasing all new batteries. Now, each battery charge will last between 350 and 450 shots, which isn't bad. For a mirrorless camera, I think that's pretty standard. If that's not quite enough for you, you can also get a battery grip, which lets you put 2 batteries in it, and that would be plenty for a full day of shooting. So I think that that's really kind of ideal. Again, really nice that you can use the same batteries. You don't have to worry about packing different styles of batteries when you're putting a couple of cameras into your bag to go photograph an event or something. Video features are very similar between the EOS R and the 5D Mark IV. You get 4K video at 30 FPS, and when you record video on the EOS R and in 4K, you have a 1.7x crop factor. And so this is a drawback. It makes it difficult if you want to shoot 4K video at wide angles. You can do that, but you're going to have the crop factor. Now, one thing that is different on this camera than on the 5D Mark IV is that this camera, with the adapter, you can actually put EFS lenses on it. And so if you know you're going to be doing a lot of 4K video, then you can put a wide angle EFS lens on the front of the camera, and that would kind of help you get that wider focal range, even though you have a crop when you're shooting the 4K video. It also supports 1080p video at 60 frames per second and 720p at 120 frames per second. So that's available for you as well. Now, for price and availability, the camera is going to be available starting next month, October, and it is going to retail for $2,300. Or if you get it with the kit lens, with the 24-105 kit, it is $3,400 for the kit. And now I'll put a picture up here that it's pretty impressive, the difference in size. If you consider this with a 5D Mark IV and a 24-105 and an EOS R and its equivalent 24-105, the size difference is pretty substantial. It's it's quite. It looks like it's a nice little kit to have. So there are a couple other RF mount lenses that are coming out this fall. First is the 35mm f1.8 IS macro. This lens is coming out in December, and that's going to be nice. I mean, it's always nice to have a 35mm lens, have a macro lens, and have that with IS. There's a lot to like about that kind of setup. In October, they're coming out with the camera. A 50mm f1.2L lenses will be available as well, which is great. I mean, the fact that a 51.2 is available from day one, I mean, that's a go-to lens for a lot of people, and so that's ideal. And again, in December, they're going to have a lens, the 28-70 f2L. I think this lens is going to sell a lot of EOS R cameras because just having a standard focal length range lens that is at f2 is just an amazing tool to have. So so I think that's going to sell a lot of EOS R cameras. Again, that one's coming in December, and so next month, October, they'll have the 50, and then the kit with the 24-105, and later on in December, they'll have the 35 and the 28-70. And I think if you want to buy the 24-105 alone, that also will be available in December. So so yeah, that's kind of a summary of the camera. I mean, who's it for? I think landscape photographers especially will really like having something that's smaller, a little bit lightweight, but still has the same image quality and the functionality of something like a 5D. I also think that indoor event photographers, concert photographers, and so forth will really make use of that 28-70 f2 lens. I mean, that's huge when you're at an indoor event with not a lot of light and being able to put a standard zoom camera on without having to go all the way to primes. That makes the camera really flexible. So I can see that being a big benefit. Who isn't it for? I don't see this being a camera for sports photography. It will do 8 frames per second, but that's only when you do autofocus on the first frame. If you want to autofocus for every frame, depending on the mode you have it set on, it only gets between 3 to 5 frames per second. So that's really not fast enough to use as a sports lens. And if you, there's some people that if you're going to be photographing a wedding or something along the line where it's a once in a lifetime event, not having that second memory card slot, I think, is definitely a drawback. And I think those people will kind of maybe hold off on getting something like the EOS R. Maybe as a second body, it would be good in that kind of situation, but for a main body, not having that instant backup of every photo you take is definitely a drawback. For me, I'm not going to buy one now. I'm really happy with the 5D Mark IV I have, but I can definitely see it once I get to the point where I'm looking to replace that camera with something new. I would definitely consider something like the EOS R. I mean, one of the things, I do a lot of traveling and I take my camera with me a lot, and to have something that's half the size and much lighter weight like that would be a huge benefit. So so yeah, I could see myself considering something like this in the future. So again, let me know in the comments if you're planning to order one. But I think Canon really did a good job on this model, and so that's about it. Again, my name is Mike from Radiant Photography. Thanks for watching.